Stay tuned to the Ask Dr. Ross podcast. It's created to give you info to succeed at college. Our hosts are highly qualified. Dr. Catherine Ross is a member of the University of Texas System's Academy of Distinguished Teachers. She's also a popular professor of 19th century English literature. Ask Dr. Ross is a community service of the University of Texas at Tyler.
So welcome to another episode of Ask Dr. Ross. This is our second series, and today we wanted to talk about homeschooling. I wanted to say a little bit about the history of homeschooling before we introduce our guests. So I thought it'd be interesting to tell you that homeschooling, the movement, started in the United States about the 1960s and 70s. And there were two people who were particularly powerful in getting it, and they were actually coming from totally different perspectives. There was John Holt, who was a progressive critic of the institutional schooling, and Raymond Moore, who was a Christian educator advocating for parental control. They both promoted homeschooling for different reasons. Holt emphasized child-centered experience and experience-based learning, while Moore was more interested in instilling values and the family experience. But over the years, it really did change. And so when I asked Ashley, well, were you a John Holt or a Raymond Moore homeschooler? She didn't even know what I was talking about. And I bet neither of you do as well. But both of these men wrote books. One of the ones that Holt wrote, he actually wrote How Children Learn and How Children Fail in the 1960s. Raymond Moore wrote Better Late Than Early, 1975. And both of them were truly interested in the child experience. So the critique of traditional schooling is common to both. The notion of unschooling came about, the notion that children learn more from experiences in life than through reading in books and sitting still in places. And that there's a kind of a sense of we can do it on our own without all this big help. That there's a lot of concern that the study of the curriculums that were part of the public school system were too narrow or in some way problematic to these individuals. Now, as you probably know, public schooling didn't start in the U.S. until 1918. In 1918, the whole country had some sort of compulsory education. But prior to that time, much of education was done in the home for girls, and a lot of times boys were sent away to boarding schools to prepare them for university. I don't think that we need to go too much into the history now, but what we want to do is introduce both of our guests and find out how you did this, why you did this, what the experience was like. So I've introduced you, Sara. Would you tell us a little bit more about yourself? You are a student at UT Tyler now?
Yes, I am an economics major. I'm a junior, and I'm in the honors college, and yeah.
Okay. What about you, Miss Lucy Holden?
I'm a freshman music major, and I'm also in the honors college.
And also, just to mention, our wonderful producer, Ashley Worley, is also a homeschool person. So we've got a homeschool roundup here. One of the things I wanted to add to the background is that to do homeschooling, it's all set up so that the way you do it, there's some certain legal requirements. You have to notify the local school district or state education department. You have to follow a state-specific rules regarding curriculum, record keeping, and standardized testing. This should all sound very familiar to you, but it might not be known to our audience. You have to meet any teacher qualifications. So sometimes the teacher must have a certain level of education, and you have to submit annual assessments or portfolios in most regulated states. Does that sound familiar to you all, that your families did all of that?
Somewhat.
If they did, I did not know.
Your parents were busy taking care of you and you didn't even know it, huh?
Didn't even know it.
So you started school, Lucy, when you were 4, 5, 6 years old?
I'm not really sure.
It's all kind of vague, huh?
It is very vague.
Okay, and how about you, Sara? Do you remember how old you were when you started homeschooling?
Yeah, probably around 4 because I had an older brother, so it was kind of just I got grouped in with him, and we just were kind of doing similar stuff.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about the story of your experience of when you started. Did you know that there was something called public school, or did you just, since your brother was already homeschooling, you were kind of into that?
Yeah, I kind of was aware that it was slightly non-traditional because all of my friends went to public school. And so I was like, oh, there is something different. So I knew about it. But in my head, it was never that different. It was more so just what my family did. But because I saw all my friends going to public school, even like sometimes I would go and meet them up there for lunch. And so I was very aware of it. It was never any sort of stigma associated with it for me.
Do you know what your parents' reasons were for sending you to, taking you out of the public schools or just doing it home?
Yeah, so my dad's a wedding photographer. And so his hours, he was gone most weekends. And my family's very family focused. And they were like, well, if they're in public school, like they'll never be able to see dad because the only times that they'll be home are the times that he'd be at weddings, traveling, and that sort of thing. And so that was the main reason that they did that, because they wanted him to be in our life and see us and stuff.
Okay, that's really interesting family planning around Daddy's career, huh? Yeah. Lucy, tell us do you know what your parents' thinking was when they chose to homeschool you?
I do. I had a very non-traditional childhood. My parents work in like a missions humanitarian organization called Mercy Ships. We traveled a lot as a child. So when we first moved to Texas, my sister was in public school. However, she hated it, and we were always like leaving, and we couldn't leave with the school, and she was always getting sick, and it was really bad. So my parents decided that they'd try homeschooling since neither of them had ever heard of it because they both came from cultures that do not homeschool. And so then we started homeschooling, and it made just everything going back and forth, back to the ships and stuff, way easier.
So once again, it was about family cohesion, following dad, or mom too, I guess, huh? Ashley, well, let's hear your voice too. Do you know what your parents were thinking when they decided to homeschool you and your sister?
Yeah, it was pretty similar actually to what they've been talking about. We traveled a little bit for my dad's work. He was an actor, and so we lived in New York City. They didn't think they were going to have kids. So we were born, and as it came time for us to get into school, there's a lot of restrictions on homeschooling in New York, and they looked at several of the private public school options, couldn't afford it, weren't loving the options in the district, so we moved to LA. And again, with the moving, homeschooling makes that so much easier.
Did you start homeschooling in New York?
We were just under the age where we would have started school in New York. So then when we get to LA, that's when we started.
Now, think about your friends in the homeschooling environment. Did they have a lot of the same reason?
For me, most of my friends, their parents decided because of more like distrust of the public school systems. I saw that a lot more with anyone who I knew who was homeschooled.
Okay, and I saw you nodding your head when she said that, Lucy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just didn't agree with a lot of the public school things and decided that ultimately homeschooling would be better so they can, lay the foundation for their own kids.
I don't really want to criticize public schooling because I'm a teacher at a public university, and I'm really glad. I think it's a fine school, and I think you all are all here because it is a fine school. But yeah, of course, historically, there have been concerns. Both John Holt and Raymond Moore had both issues about the way children learn and also sort of ethical, personal, family values involved. But what I'm most interested in is, how did you learn in these schools? What was the experience like? And, how did the transition from being at homeschooling, where you had a whole lot of freedom, to being at university work for you? So why don't we just start with you, Sara. Tell us a little bit about your earliest memories of homeschooling and how you felt about learning and being a learner.
Yeah, so the way that most of our curriculums worked was we had like a book or a base that we were working through with my mom. And so that's kind of how we did it. And I just remember, for instance, for math, we kept with the same curriculum our entire K through 12. It was the same guy doing it.
And when you say the same guy doing it, were these materials that came from a homeschooling publication outlet?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I have no idea where she found it, but it was this one specific man who was a math teacher, and we'd watch his videos and work through his book and stuff, and so have the fondest memories of him because he was prevalent to my childhood. But so that's how most of it was. We'd have a history book and work through it, and it was part my mom going off of that, and then part coming up with activities to enhance it and to fit it more to us.
My understanding that the states require certain text being used or a certain range of text being used, that all of these materials are approved for getting you ready to go to college if you want to do that. So it's not just some fly-by-the-night fellow who thinks, I know how to teach math, and so I'm going to do it. And in fact, it might be a good idea to tell us a little bit about these co-ops, because I think, aren't the co-ops kind of a clearinghouse for where you get your materials? Does that sound right to you, Lucy?
Before I started a co-op, my mother would find the materials on her own. There's multiple curriculums online that you can buy, and you can research which ones you like and stuff. When I was in like elementary, we used this one called My Father's World, I think was the name of it. And so it was very like nature-based or like biblical-based as well, because my family is Christian. And so then we would go through all of these like different things, and they had different like history section, math section, science section. So a lot of my like early childhood was spent like outdoors and being able to look at stuff. When we did like science, we'd go to like find stuff in the wild, you know?
Oh, that sounds like fun.
It was very fun. But then once I got to, I think it was 5th grade or 4th grade, my parents enrolled me into co-op, and that's where I stayed until I graduated.
Is it graded, like 1st grade, 2nd grade, on the way up to 12th grade?
Yeah.
Okay, so you feel like you're moving through a curriculum year by year. Is there a time limit? Do you have to finish 1st grade by the end of June or something? Or
I think that more is how the individual family set it up. For instance, like we often took our summers a good bit earlier than whenever a public school got out, because like I've lived in East Texas my whole life, so it gets warm down here in the summer.
Oh, yeah. Get out of Texas in the summer.
And so they wanted us to, like, whenever we're off of school, actually be able to play and go outside and everything. Whereas I think that public schools, I think it's like
June.
Yeah. And then, like, even in July. And so, like, you just don't want to be outside at that time. And so I think it was more up to the individual families, how the structure of when does 1st grade end.
Do you remember when you first started, what it was like? Were you reading books as a family or with your mom?
Yeah, my mom would often like read the history books to us, and we do like little projects and things when we first started. I feel like the elementary part was way more fun than anything else that we ever did.
Really?
Yeah, that was the only time really that my mom actually taught me.
Was your mother trained as a teacher?
No, my mother's a nurse.
She's a nurse. And what about your mom, Sarah?
My mom had some college for teaching, yes.
And what about your mom?
My mom is a speech language pathologist, so she worked with little kids and did some level of learning and activities with them, but she's not a teacher or anything in that vein.
So now that you've had some university teachers, which are real different from elementary school teachers, I know, but you look back and you say, my mom was pretty darn good as a teacher? I'll look at you first, Sarah.
Yeah, so I think that I personally probably would have been better suited for a public school, not because of anything of her teaching wise, just relationship dynamic wise. It makes it a lot easier for me knowing that this is my professor, I go to them for this, versus where my mom, and oftentimes moms are anyway, but like the catch-all be-all, you know what I mean? This is my teacher, my mom, caregiver.
Yeah, I was wondering about, as a mother, my training as a teacher, and I will tell you, I'm an English professor at the university, but I was never a public school teacher. I did teach for a while, 7 through 12, at a very posh private boys' school and another very posh girls' school, where the kids were highly motivated to be there, and their parents were paying a lot of money for them to be there. So I know a little bit about teaching that lower level, but teaching is a complicated job. It's also a job where you have to discipline. You have to say no. You have to give bad grades sometimes. You have to look at a student and say, this will not do. And so I'm kind of wondering, you mentioned that you and your mom, maybe, was it tough for your relationship sometimes?
Yeah, I think that impacted both sides of like the mother-daughter relationship and like the teacher-student relationship, because like I love to have a coach. I love to know this is the person in charge. I'm listening, and it really helps me to set myself up on a path for that. And so whenever those lines are blurred and it's just a different level of, and this is on me, like I don't feel like I have to bring my best, like, because it's just my mom,
Because she loves you anyway. Right.
She loves me, versus whenever I go to class, I'm like, okay, I'm here to work. This is what, it just, for me, the different mindsets, them overlapping didn't work as well.
Did your dad ever act as a teacher, or was it always your mom?
Not really. It was mostly my mom.
But then did you go to a co-op where you had other teachers?
That's the thing. I didn't go to a co-op. I did a lot of dual credit in high school. So that was the first time that I had the home learning experience, because a lot of my high school was dual credit at our community college.
So did you attend the classes at the community college, or were they online?
A mix of both, yeah.
So you did go to some traditional classrooms where freshman English or freshman history. How old were you when you were doing that?
Oh my goodness. I would have been, I guess 13, yeah.
So you're a 14-year-old college freshman?
Yes, and I loved it. I just really thrived so much more in that environment.
That's interesting to hear. Now, I'm looking at you, Lucy, and did you say you're a music major?
Yes, ma'am.
So we're going to want to hear about how you got there, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about how your relationship with your mom or your teachers were when you were in homeschool.
Well, unlike Sarah, I did go to a co-op. So my mom stopped teaching me before grades were really a thing. So, I mean, where you got graded was for us 6th to 12th grade mostly. And so I had teachers for every subject and teachers for everything. So my mom really didn't have a teacher role in my education.
So that's quite different from Sarah's.
Yes. So I had teachers who would grade me and I'd be fine with it.
And would you attend classes? Like, would you go to somebody's home?
No, it was in a church actually. And it was Tuesday, Thursday, I would go to classes, so twice a week. But this church was specifically set up for a lot of homeschool things. So there was like a lab in the church and a library and things. So it was very similar to like a traditional school with a lot less people and a lot less like amenities.
Ashley, you did your homeschooling, started it in L.A.
Yes, and so that was when I was pretty little. We went to a little private school for, I think, pre-K, and they realized very quickly she's not going to do good in public school. And not because I wasn't, like, smart or anything, because they would be like, so how's she doing, teachers? And they're like, well, she's such a sweet person, and she loves to learn, and she loves to read, but she doesn't want to change stations when she's told, and she can't sit still.
Oh, okay.
And they were like, is she staying at the reading station? They were like, yeah, she's staying at the reading station.
Because you love reading, okay.
And I'm also a very kinetic learner. To this day, I can't, like, sit with both my feet on the ground, like, straight. Like, it just doesn't work for me. I'm distracted. So I have to, like, sit legs crossed or do something with my hands.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the public school routine was limiting you and you couldn't hold still long enough. And that's actually one of the things that John Holt talked about, is that public schools were oftentimes too routine, too regimented for children, and that they needed greater freedom. So you're sort of telling us that it wasn't just because your parents had to move around and they wanted to be with their dad during the week or when your family was going off on a mercy ship. There was partly because of the way you were learning, and so it was about your personal learning style. What about your older sister? Was there anything going on there too, or?
Not necessarily. She's very organized.
So you were the busy little kid who couldn't sit still in school. Your older sister was more routine and organized. But was she already doing homeschool, or were you the reason they started homeschool?
No, I think they were already thinking about homeschooling. And the private school we went to, there was like a change in who was running it. And so that's kind of what pushed us towards, okay, well, maybe we'll do our curriculum at home.
So just to make it clear to me, those of you who were not in a co-op, you were in the house, but you also went outside. Did you go on trips? I mean, because I know part of the idea of homeschooling is supposed to be very experiential. Can you tell us, Sarah, a little bit about the experiential part of your homeschooling?
Yeah, for sure. So I am from Palestine, and like, for instance, there we have like a big park, and so anytime we're doing anything like you mentioned, like science wise, we're going to that park, and we have a pretty good sized backyard, so it's a lot of moving around in that way. And they were also very big on taking trips, like little trips, like for instance, I can't remember what city it was. It must have been Houston. We had a pass which allowed us to go to the zoo and the museum at any point, and since our dad is off during the week, he goes with us. Whenever, like, I think back of my like school experience, I don't really think of it as much in the house, especially because even though it wasn't necessarily a co-op, we had friends who were also homeschooled. And so a lot of the times it was us going to their house. My mom had a friend, and I believe she was a high school Spanish teacher before. And so we would go to her house, and a couple other people would come over, and we would all do a Spanish lesson. And then afterwards, we would all go play outside in their backyard because they have like land.
So learning and playing was kind of the routine, and going to different places. So it wasn't just staying in the house.
Yeah, for sure.
How about that for you, Lucy? I guess you were on ships and things. You were moving all around when you were being educated. And was Mom doing all of that, or did your dad help?
My dad helped some. It was mostly my mom, though. My dad has a very time-consuming job, so.
What's your dad do?
He's in charge of the maintenance of both of the ships that they have right now.
Oh, wow. So I think he's an engineer.
He was an engineer, yes, and now he's more like overseeing.
So he had a really demanding job day in and day out while you were traveling. Mm-hmm. So your mom was doing it. Did you have siblings?
I have one sister. She's older than me.
Older than you. So you were both doing it, but you would have been at different grade levels, right?
Yeah, she's 3 years older than me.
Oh, wow. So did your sister ever help you to study or learn, or was she ever a part of that? Oh, we just got a funny look when we said that. Not at all, huh?
She tried. She was very nice if I asked her and stuff, but eventually, like, she is a mechanical engineer.
And you're the musician.
She's also a musician. She's just multi-talented. It's crazy. But she would be able to help me with stuff because she's good at everything. But then we'd get to, like, math that I don't understand. And so my senior year of high school, she said, don't take math at the co-op. I'll teach you at home with this curriculum we already have that I took in high school. And I think we got about 2 weeks in, and we fought so much that I said, I'm doing it myself. And I almost failed that class, but we were good.
Oh, wow. Okay. So did your sister go on to college?
Yeah, she's graduating in May.
Is she at UT Tyler?
She's at LeTourneau University.
LeTourneau, okay. And did you come in as an honor student, too?
To UT? Yes.
So just a little thing here. We've got 3 honor students here, and I think we better take a moment to talk about that for a minute. We have an honors college at UT Tyler established by one of my colleagues, Dr. Paul Stroyfert. And it's not real easy to become an honor student. Could you tell us a little bit about, why don't we start with you, Ashley? How did you get picked to be in the honors college, you know?
Well, the only reason we even knew about it in the first place was because Whitney got accepted before me.
Your older sister, okay. And do you know what the applications included? Because it's very selective to be in the honors college.
It is. The applications start with, I think, just like a traditional application where you tell them a lot of information about yourself. They ask you an essay. Then after the essay, they call you in for an interview. Whitney did hers in person. I had mine over Zoom. I think it's changed a little bit. Then they interview you, and they make selections for who's on what scholarship and who's accepted into the cohort.
Do you all get grades in homeschooling? Do you have grades? You have a class? I mean, so you have an A in your English class and an A in your, and so they could look at your grades. Did you all also take things like the SAT or the ACT test?
I did not. I took the TSI and like that one, but I didn't take the SAT.
Okay, and Lucy, you nodded. You did take.
I took the SAT and PSAT.
And what about you, Ashley?
I took the SATs, and I also took the TSI.
The TSI is a set of tests that tells where you are in your readiness for college. So back it up a minute, the Honors College is pretty special too. What do you do in the Honors College? What makes it different from the rest of the university? Lucy?
Well, you get to take a world text class, so like a literature class basically for your freshman year for 2 semesters. It's a lot of discussion and getting to like throw around ideas that you read in these books. The section I'm in started with Greek tragedies in the first semester, and then this semester we've done a lot of like Kant, Freud, and Nietzsche. And so it's been very interesting getting to hear all the differing perspectives from all of these kids who have very like different backgrounds and, you know, went to public school, private school, homeschool. Everyone's like kind of in there, so it's nice to be able to discuss about it.
I will just insert this right now. My experience with students who are homeschooled is that they were always really well motivated, really well prepared, and engaged in class. And I felt as though whoever their parents were had done a great job. And, you know, I've worked with you now, Ashley, for a while, and although I haven't had you in class, my sense of you is you're extremely responsible, resourceful, and I've heard the same thing about the two of you as well, by the way, that you're something special. But I do know that when I've taught honor sections, that the students were highly motivated. Highly motivated students tend to be much more ready to engage. They don't want to sit back. Do you understand how your homeschooling made it possible for you to be one of these more actively engaged intellectual students?
I feel like homeschooling really gave me the opportunity to come into my own person faster than other people because I've always been me. And so my parents have struggled with that a little bit because, trying to raise a kid who's not like you sometimes is a little bit, But I think getting to become my own person and have my own thoughts really early. So going through my high school years as a very confident individual, I just loved learning. I loved consuming knowledge, and I loved being in classes and discussing and being able to share my thoughts and go into places that you don't really get to go into when everyone around you isn't as involved. So I think joining the honors college and seeing other people who are also really engaged and like being engaged, even if you don't say much in class, you say this one comment and it goes 10 places and then, you've said one thing in class the whole time, but you still get to sponge everything in, I guess. And I've really enjoyed that for sure.
I do think this is true. There's something that you all have done that has made you, I think, lifelong learners. What about that, Sara? Do you kind of understand what I'm talking about there? Do you feel like homeschooling made you a lifelong learner?
I think that, and what you were saying about engaging too, in my head, there was never another option. Do you know what I mean? Versus if I'm sitting in a classroom of 20 to 50 people.
At the university?
Yes, ma'am. Or just even imagining myself in a public school. I don't have to be the one to raise my hand, to answer the question, to volunteer my thoughts. Whenever you're in a room with either your siblings or by yourself, or whenever you're talking about those thoughts, you have to be the one to engage and to talk about the ideas. So it was never an option to just sink into the wall, So I think that that's what really made it to where when I had to be engaged, whenever I had the option to be engaged, I chose that because of my past experience with that.
Well, and you're also with your siblings. Yeah. I mean, everybody has different experiences with their siblings, but I think you tend to know that they care about you. And if they tease you or make fun of you, it's usually kindly meant. I don't know. Maybe your brother's a real stinker. I don't know. But I do know that oftentimes we hear stories of children being really intimidated by their classmates. And I've had neighbors who, I'm thinking about one daughter in particular, daughter of a friend in the neighborhood who she started at the local public school, and she was a little bit larger than some of the other kids and had been in a different school system, and the kids were really mean to her, and they took her out and homeschooled her. That worries me a lot that can happen. My guess is that there's something about the homeschooling experience that gives you a kind of intellectual independence, a kind of natural curiosity that makes you an ideal college student. So how's college going for you, Lucy? When you got here, was it any big surprise, any big differences?
No, I've really just adjusted well. It was pretty seamless for me. I didn't feel overwhelmed or anything. The amount of work I get here was the same at my co-op, basically. I guess I have more of a focus on music parts because of my major, which I've really enjoyed, of course.
How did you get to be a music major as a homeschool kid? Because usually I think of schools as the places where they have bands and orchestras. So how'd that work?
It was very interesting because the co-op I went to was very STEM focused. There's no arts at all. Ashley and I went to the same co-op. So there was a journalism club, and that was about all that there was for arts related things, unless you took an art class. So there was no music. Everything I've done in music has been on my own and taking lessons and stuff. So I just so happened to take lessons with Dr. Park, the professor of voice here at UT Tyler. I took lessons with her in high school. And so then I had no idea what I wanted to do when I graduated. So this was probably February or January of last year. And I ran into her and she's like, come talk to me and we'll talk about it. And so she gave me this whole plan of start with your BA in music so you're not stuck in music if you want to change. And so then that's what I did. I started, and I'd never done choir, never done theater or anything. So I was a voice major last semester in BA. Then I eventually switched to this semester. I'm doing vocal performance as my BM.
So I know that you mentioned that your co-op was pretty STEM oriented, and I think, Ashley, you've told me that too. And I think you had some thoughts about that. You want to share those?
Yeah, Lucy and I went to the same co-op, actually. She followed me here. But it was very STEM-oriented, like she said. Journalism only became a thing when I was coming into my freshman year in high school. And besides that, I think they had theater, but that was always like a question mark subject because sometimes they had it, sometimes they didn't. And it was always a very small group of kids. So it was very STEM-focused, and I was not a very STEM-oriented person.
So you were an artistically inclined student, and yet your co-op was a STEM place. You think about homeschooling as being able to tailor things to individual students' needs and interests, and so you're telling me that maybe you felt a little bit constrained?
A little bit, but one thing about homeschooling is that it teaches you if something is not already set up for you to go in and get what you need, you build something. So I did not have a lot of the same resources and having a music class, having tons of fun English classes or something like that. But that gave me more room to be like, well, how can I learn some of this stuff on my own? And when I hit my senior year in high school, they started this new thing. We were the first class to do it for the senior capstone project. So it was completely customized to whatever the student wanted to do. They had to create a project with such and such criteria, but the criteria were very broad. And as long as you turned in progress markers of your work and you would come to class and share what you had, because of that, I got to go, oh, well, let me make a short film because I absolutely love movies and I have never even come close to knowing what's involved in making one. So it was a little bit of a dumpster fire.
Wow.
I say it was a dumpster fire on my end, completely on my end, because like I said, I'd never done any of this before. But you know what? I think I learned more from that project than I could have by taking any kind of class in how to make a movie. Lucy came and she scored the film for me. We got some art that we needed as props from a friend of mine. Another one of the people who was my classmate, wonderful guy. He was the main actor in it. So all of this stuff. I didn't have necessarily the resources as in there's already a film class set up, there's already a music class set up, there's already these sorts of things for you to go in and have the opportunity. But homeschooling inherently has room for you to create your own opportunities. And I think that's a valuable experience of itself.
So you all are all independent-minded people, but are there any kids that you experienced that you went to homeschooling co-op with who maybe weren't so self-motivated, who weren't such good engagers? Is that a problem? Do you have some kids that just kind of sleep through it and their parents just let them?
There's a lot of kids in homeschool who don't put in the work needed, so then they get to their junior, senior year and they have nothing that's there for them to be able to go to a good college or anything and stuff. Not a lot, but a few of these kids end up not being able to complete any sort of degree, or they just don't have any sort of meaning to their life after they finish their schooling. And some parents are very enabling of allowing their kids to just go through homeschool and have easy school, I guess. It's not rigorous, it's just them getting the core curriculum done that you need to graduate.
Sara wants to say something.
Yeah, so I was just thinking of my own experience, whereas most of the other homeschool people I had knew a lot about were my brothers. And so we are all completely opposite personalities. And so whenever you said parents enabling, I think that's really what it comes down to, because I'm a very independent, do it myself, I'm going to put in the work. Whereas my brothers, some of them are more reserved or more I'll kind of take what the world kind of gives to me sort of things. But we all had the same parents. They weren't okay with that. Do you know what I mean? And so whenever you said parents enabling, I think that's when it comes down to, because some kids are going to go for it and some are going to be much more to the side. And so I think if you are wanting to homeschool your kids, I think you have to be able to be that we're not going to let this fly.
Yeah, it strikes me that it's an incredible amount of responsibility to be a parent, just a parent for individual kids, especially every child is different. Every child deserves to be treated and brought up to what their best selves are. And add into that having to be their teacher too. That's a lot to put on a parent. And I'm sure that's probably part of the reason why these co-ops got developed, so that they could kind of share it, not only because it's, being a teacher and a parent is a hard thing, but teaching math and music, teaching literature and biology. That's a lot of things for a parent to know. What did you want to add to that? I think I saw you respond for a minute there, Lucy.
Yeah, I think that a lot of just the co-op development was definitely to come alongside parents. I mean, my mom's not really a math person, so her teaching me math wouldn't have gone well. And so I think it's really cool to have the opportunity that if there's a subject that you just didn't excel in school, or you just struggled with always, it's like there's someone out there who will teach your kid for you, and they'll get a good education still.
So what is social life like for kids in homeschool? Now, you were not in a co-op, right, Sara? So did you have a social life, or was it just you and your brothers?
Yeah, so my house was the house that all my friends came over to. So most of my friends I met through church, or my parents' friends had kids. And so we had a good little group that we knew. And a lot of it was people coming to our house and hanging out with us. Whenever I think about my childhood, I don't just think about my brothers and I in a room. There were always lots of people around and friends.
Do you think your parents intentionally encouraged that because you all were homeschooled, or was it just the way your parents were? They were just the family in the neighborhood everybody loved.
A little bit of both, I would say, for sure.
And this is out in Palestine, which is a little town.
Yeah, it's small. And so I think that they are very intentional people in that way. So they saw we don't want them to be in a corner just knowing each other. We want them to grow and talk to people and be social. But then in the other way, that's just who they are as people.
Ashley, what was your social life like?
I'd say it's pretty normal. Co-ops have that a little bit built into them, but I think maybe a common thing that I've heard from other homeschoolers, regardless of how they set up homeschooling, was that you don't have a group that's already inbuilt for you to belong in. So you end up kind of talking to a lot of different types of people and talking to everybody. So we, not necessarily in LA, we had a co-op in LA that we would go take field trips with, know these other kids through. But here especially, we would join homeschool sports groups.
That's what I was going to ask about, if you have sports and musical performances.
Oh yeah. I don't know about the music side of it, but definitely there were sports. My parents were coaches for the middle school girls basketball team. They got it started, and now I think they're fairly competitive. So there's other things that you get involved in, kind of because you have to. That's the other thing about homeschooling, is that it really takes the engagement of the parent because, like you said, they're having to do all of these different things. So if you're not engaged, if you're wanting to treat it like maybe a public school where, we'll send our kids one day a week and they'll do all the stuff, but you're not helping them to learn their own time management and say, hey, did you do your homework? Sit around the dinner table with them and ask them how things are going and talk about things, then I don't think homeschooling necessarily is going to work.
Well, if we think about public school, we think, okay, kids go to school, classes start probably at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. They do stuff in the morning. They go to big lunch cafeteria and have lunch, and they go do some sports, or maybe they have class in the afternoon and they have some sports, and they go home by 3 o'clock. And maybe they have the boys' basketball team and the girls' basketball team. We had a choir and all those sorts of things. And so things are kind of done for you. And for parents, the parents don't have to do much, but as you said, send them off. Although I think a lot of parents are involved in things like the Parent-Teacher Association, and sometimes parents are coaches and things. But what I'm wondering about is, do you have a school day? I know you said Tuesdays and Thursdays you would go to the co-op, but Monday, Wednesday, Friday, what'd you do?
I did homework because they would send us home with homework for the week. So how it would work is you would go to your class on Tuesday, and then they'd give you a week's worth of work that you would turn in the next Tuesday or Thursday or whenever.
So that's a lot of time management, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Because you don't have anyone over your shoulder being like, are you getting it done? Because we have class that ends in 15 minutes.
Right, and you don't have a study hall where they say, okay, do your homework now.
There's no study hall. And so it was just up to me to get it done. Granted, I didn't always do the best job of not procrastinating it till the day before, but I would try to get it done over the 5-day period.
Do you feel as though what you learned about how to do that in homeschooling environment has served you well in college? Are you just as good at time management, or maybe you're just so used to it?
Yeah, it felt very natural coming in. There's some weeks where I don't do as well as other weeks, of course, but it just depends on the workload, practice, and things. And so it's been pretty good.
So it's about time to pull this thing together, and I was wondering, what was the biggest challenge for you, Sara, coming to college from a homeschool background?
I think that for me, my biggest challenge didn't lie in anything related to my actual education or time management. I think that it was about finding my support system and finding my team here, whereas I was literally born into my team and support system before. And so I know that this can be the way obviously with public school students as well, but I think that they've kind of had that experience of okay, this is the teacher I can go to for this. They've had to find that a little bit more, whereas I always knew who it was. And so coming to college, I'm okay, who can I go to for this? And
who's your family?
Yeah, who's my family here? Since before, my family covered everything. My family was my teachers. My family was everything in that way. So having to find my family in college was a whole new learning experience.
Well, and, of course, one of the big developmental shifts for college-age students is to find a certain amount of autonomy so that they stand alone without their family. Not that you ever, not have your family, but you've got to go on out in the world one day without mom and dad. And so has that been a challenge for you, too?
No, I came out of the womb wanting to go off on my own, so not really in that way, no.
Would you say the same thing for your brothers?
So actually, one of them, he had the same experience. He's kind of quiet independent. I'm loud independent. But there's two more on the way. One is starting school actually this coming fall. So I'm curious to see how it looks for them because they're so opposite of us. And so what will be their experience in that way?
So, Lucy, when you think about it, has there been any particular challenge as you've entered the college experience that you feel like your homeschool either really helped you with or maybe didn't help you with as much?
Not particularly. I mean, I was lucky to come into the music program where it's very small and it's very it's really easy to connect with people. So I have a really good friends and I get to be with them a lot because we have classes every day for 2 semesters until the end of our sophomore year. We're going to be together. So.
Well, and plus you had your music teacher from when you were in school before you came here, and I would say that gives you a certain continuity.
Yes, I was very set up before I got here. It was very nice. I mean, I guess something I wasn't used to is being around so many people all the time. Well, to a certain extent I was, because living on the ships, you're around a lot of people. But we haven't lived there in a little while, so I've been at home, and getting to stay home and only go to school twice a week. But now, I have to drive in every day, commuting and stuff.
Yeah, and an hour every day?
It depends on the traffic, but it can be anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour. But I have music. We're good, guys.
Oh, well, you're the music girl. There you go. Okay. So, Ashley, can you answer the same question? Is there something that you were either especially well prepared for or maybe not as well prepared for because of the homeschooling as you came into the university environment?
I think one of the things that I felt really prepared for, kind of like what they were talking about, is time management skills. Because you have to do all of your stuff. When I was in kindergarten through elementary, when we were in LA and it was just us at home, our mom, she bought us the curriculums. She'd leave a list for each of us on the table, had our little name on top of it, and it was the list of the stuff that we needed to do homework-wise.
Like chores, feed the dog, fold the laundry, do the math.
Yeah. So there was that element of it where this is what you have to do. And there's our dad is working. He worked from home, but he's working. And so we have to do it. And if you don't do it, mom's going to come home and be like, why didn't you do your work? You had all this time. It was empty space. Literally, what were you doing?
But you also had the freedom during the day to decide when you were going to do the math or when you were going to do the history. And so you had the freedom and you could not have to worry about having both of your feet on the floor at the same time and all those things that worried you before.
Right. My mom always tells people she read every single book and did all her homework flat on her stomach on the floor.
Really?
I was the same way. Exactly.
I don't think you could have gotten away with that in a public school, could you?
No.
So I guess we ought to kind of wrap up there. Is there anything that you all wanted to say about being a homeschool student, or are there misconceptions about homeschool? Are there things that you want to? I saw some nods there.
I don't know. I mean, there's obviously misconceptions about they're all not socialized. I get called homeschool jungle freak, like the Mean Girls movie, a lot.
Homeschool jungle freak.
Yeah, in the movie, because the girl was homeschooled in Africa. That's what happened to me too. So we have to get the nickname, I guess. But that's one of the stereotypes is that, they're all kind of just geeks or really conservative, scary people, or really cult type person. And so I think a lot of people do have that mindset. Me and Ashley were talking to someone the other day who went to a private school, and he was like, yeah, y'all are just the most normal homeschoolers I've ever met. We're like, who have you been meeting? But I like to think that most homeschoolers are pretty normal, at least the ones I hang out with.
Do you ever have to worry about a stereotype there, Sara?
Yeah, I think that my biggest misconception, I think that it's every homeschool experience is quite similar. Whereas even here, y'all are a bit more similar because y'all had the same co-op, but we have very different experiences in what our homeschool community life day to day looked like. And so I think that whenever someone's they either knew someone who was homeschooled growing up, they kind of assume that it's a copy and paste, very similar to everyone's experiences. Whereas I think that maybe even more than public school, it's very, very different experiences.
Yeah, I certainly gathered that from you all, is that it allowed you to be an independent, individual person. There was freedom for you to develop who you needed to be, and if you wanted to read on your stomach all day long, and that was fine. None of you seem to be sociopaths or have bad habits, and, your grammar's good and your hygiene's good. And I'm teasing you, but I'm also saying that the thing I have loved the most about my homeschooled students is what we've been talking about here, is that you really do engage and you seem to be lively learners. And to me, that is the biggest thing about college, is that we want to keep you learning, opening up the world to you. And if you're already a lively learner, if you're already knowing how to engage and you have time management, then you are on the road. And so I hope that this is an interesting program for people who've been thinking about it. There's a lot of information out there if you want to look into it for your children. There's important state regulations and rules and standards. If a parent is really motivated to be both a parent and a teacher and feel that they have the skill. It does sound to me like your parents are all pretty amazing, and I think oftentimes amazing parents make amazing students, whether they're homeschooled or not. So I'm just real glad to have gotten to talk to you all today. I guess that's a way to wrap it up, huh, Ashley? Do you want to add anything or conclude with any other thing?
No, I don't think so. But if you're a homeschooler and you have specific questions about coming to college, definitely send us an email. Our email is adrquestions@gmail.com. And you can ask us anything. You could leave a comment under the YouTube video if you're listening to this on YouTube. And we'll answer your questions for you.
Yeah, we're real eager to have our listening audience to call in and talk to us about just about anything that confuses them or interests them. And if I can't answer it and Ashley can't answer it, we'll get Sara and Lucy. UT Tyler is eager for the community to know what a great resource we are, and we're really happy to be here. So I think that's a wrap.